What's up, guys? I'm your host, EJ Stewart. Thank you all for checking out this edition of New Generation Sports Talk, both on Podcast Network and on YouTube. I'm joined by Kendall Stewart for today. Kendall, we got a lot to talk about when it comes to the NBA offseason, a lot of big-time moves in free agency and trades. We also had the NBA draft happen just this past week, so a lot of movement. Summer League games are underway as well. Las Vegas Summer League coming up very quickly. So it just seems like a lot is happening. There's so much to get to. So I wanted to make sure both our YouTube subscribers and the podcast listeners got a podcast from us, talking about all the stuff that's gone down.
Yeah, no doubt. Glad to be here. Obviously, we had a fun NBA draft, so I'm excited to talk about some of the. Excited to preview the summer league a little bit, but I would be. I don't want to neglect to mention a college basketball story that may be brewing in the horizon. I know EJ knows what I'm talking about. But speaking of free agency, my guy Penny Hardaway and the Memphis Tigers are seem to be. We don't know. By the time you're listening to this, maybe we do know on one guy, but seem to be lining up the idea of landing Imani Bates and Jalen Duren, the top two high school basketball players in the class of 2022, who plan on reclassifying to the class of 21. So that will wind up being one of the bigger stories in basketball if that were to happen next season. So again, wouldn't want to forget to mention that for our people, our uncommitted podcast listeners. So yeah, no doubt. But from the NBA perspective, so much stuff, so little time to get to it all. But excited to talk about it all because it's been a busy week and a half.
Yeah, when it comes to Imani Bates, who's one of the most highly touted, highly hyped high school basketball players, we talked about him plenty, not just on the podcast, but on the YouTube channel, especially on our podcast, of course, the Uncommitted podcast. Him reclassifying and teaming up with Duren, who those guys are essentially 1 and 2 in their class, would be epic, a deal of epic proportions. And if indeed happens at Memphis, which is, again, the tea leaves are suggesting the stars may be aligning for the Tigers, man, what a story that will be. And I'm sure we'll be talking plenty about that on the next episode of The Uncommitted. But I do want to focus on the NBA offseason. And again, Kendall, a lot of shakeups have happened, and it starts in Los Angeles. You knew an offseason that came off of a failed kind of repeat championship run, a first-round exit that was marred by injuries and fatigue with the Los Angeles Lakers. You knew bold moves were coming. We didn't know how that would take shape, but now we do. Russell Westbrook, just previously, obviously with the Washington Wizards, traded to the Los Angeles Lakers after requesting a trade. He goes to Los Angeles. Kuzma, Harrell, and KCP all going to the Wizards. Then you had the Melo deal. Then you had the Kendrick Nunn deal. You had Ariza going there. You had Bazemore, Wayne Ellington. The Lakers now have the oldest roster in NBA history, which when I heard that stat, I literally could not believe it. But, I mean, they have a lot of older players, obviously, and it's kind of become a little bit of a I think it's actually been I know Kendall's a Celtic fan. He probably doesn't love it. I've had fun actually hearing this back and forth in discourse about, is it
Malik
old?
Monk, another name.
Yeah, Malik Monk, of course, he's not an old player. He's a younger player, and along with Nunn, obviously,
Yeah.
who came off a really good year in Charlotte. I've loved this kind of debate of, is it old age? Are they our old team, or are they experienced, and will that help them? That seems to be the question everybody's having. Is this a team that really can go to the distance and win a championship again, or is it just too much age? And I'm posing that question to you. How do you look at this Laker team coming into the season? They have these big names and these stars, but are they just past their prime, to really make a serious championship run?
You know, when you were reading off the names, and I heard Ariza, I heard Bazemore, I heard Melo. I mean, the first instinct was, how much help do you need, LeBron? No, Ellington. I'm like, how much help does LeBron need? I mean,
I don't think this is a Wade and Boss situation happening this all season. Let's just say that. Though shout out to Carmelo Anthony, of course, future Hall of Famer, not who he once was.
I've maybe I spent too much time on basketball Twitter, man. With the Durant LeBron discourse has been quite bad. But when it comes to this Lakers team, I feel like it's an experiment that. I mean, look, the super team experiment has had mixed results in NBA history, at least since the Miami Heat. I mean, Miami Heat, really the Celtics were the first one in terms of, having these 3 stars, and then a lot of the rest of the team being a bunch of older guys or really young players that are unproven. Mm-hmm. And then the Miami Heat tried that, and we've seen team after team, the older teams where it worked, but we've seen the Lakers with Dwight. And Powell and Kobe, like that didn't work with Steve Nash and Metta World Peace. So the Nets last year, I mean, we know that they were the most talented team in the league, but I can't really say it worked because they lost in the second round of the NBA playoffs. So there's mixed results when you talk about building a team this way. But when I mentioned the Brooklyn Nets, I feel like that was at the forefront of the Lakers management's minds when it came to building this roster.
So you don't think they were really even concerned about the Western Conference, whether it be the Suns or the Nuggets or any of these other teams? You think this is purely about the Brooklyn Hydra, the three-headed monster that's on that Eastern Conference, despite their inability to get to the finals because of the injuries?
The way this team is built, I mean, look, they could beat Utah. They could. I mean, they're certainly. They may end up being the favorites in the Western Conference, but they're not. They didn't. I don't feel like they didn't bring in pieces that are designed to beat Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton. I didn't feel that. Bringing a Dwight Howard back is another guy that that they brought in. I feel like they didn't bring in pieces necessarily. Like when you bring in all these names. And they're a guy that they didn't end up getting that they were talking about, like DeMar DeRozan, Victor Oladipo was being talked about. Like when you try and bring in all these names, that to me screams we've got to beat that team at the top. And no disrespect to the Milwaukee Bucks, they'll certainly be in the picture as well. They're the defending champs, but the Brooklyn Nets are the team that certainly I think scares the Lakers the most, because if you can't beat the Phoenix Suns, I don't know if they feel like they had the firepower to beat the Brooklyn Nets. Mm-hmm. They still may not, but now it's a conversation. When you talk about having Westbrook, who can certainly help LeBron, in the postseason it's going to be an awkward fit, but during the regular season, from a load management perspective, it's going to help LeBron and AD tremendously, because he's a guy we know Westbrook can certainly carry a load. Ask Bradley Beal. So Westbrook's going to help. Having a guy like Melo, who should help them in the postseason with his clutch ability and his shot-making ability, and his ability to space the floor for guys like LeBron and AD and Russ. And you bring in guys with high upsides like Monk and Nunn. Yeah. Again, these moves, and then again, you have the guys with another name in Dwight Howard. Like, it's a hodgepodge that doesn't make a whole lot of basketball sense. But, a lot of the Brooklyn Nets last year didn't make a ton of basketball sense. They just had another team that had a lot of names, and they tried to put it together, and they had a lot of injuries. But, that's the deal with this Laker team. I know some people have really hot takes about this team's gonna stink or this team's gonna win it all and get, hop on the bandwagon.
Right.
I can't give you one of those takes. I'll be honest. You really have to just evaluate it
as it happens.
Yeah. There's a combination that, I mean, again, it doesn't look great on paper, but the names are, or you can't. Some are legendary. Yeah, exactly. We have multiple, at least five Hall of Famers on this team. Yeah. That's something you can't overlook.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing about this Laker experiment, and I think you used the right word, experiment, because, I agree. I found it's funny. We're in this kind of hot take business, and everybody has to say they're either going to be great or terrible. And sometimes I think it kind of takes away from the fan experience, just sitting back and watching, seeing what this is going to be. And that's kind of how I've taken this Laker thing. I'm not into I definitely think they're going to be great or they're definitely going to be terrible. I mean, I really have no idea. I've never really seen a team built like this. So many. I guess the last team that was close was probably the 1998 Houston Rockets, or 99 Rockets rather. When they added Scottie Pippen. And they already had Barkley and Olajuwon and Drexler. That team didn't have an Anthony Davis who was like clearly in his prime, or even a LeBron James who even in his advanced age
The
is
top
still
5 player in the league.
easily a top 5 player, maybe top 2. Like he's that good still. So there's a difference there, but that's like the closest thing to this, and obviously that didn't go that great. But I think even this is different because there's more names, more star players who at least guys who were stars in their past. And I think it's going to be a fun experiment. I do have some concerns about do they have enough shooting. I know they added Wayne Ellington. He's always been hit or miss for me. He's never really excited me, and he's even at an advanced stage now. I think he's almost 30. I think he's 33 years old. Malik Monk, I think was the move that I thought, okay, if he comes in with confidence and can continue to play, he's in a lot brighter stage now, playing for the Lakers as opposed to playing for last season's Hornets. But this guy did go to University of Kentucky, so I don't think he's scared of big games or things like that, and he's never been scared of big shots. So
exactly.
So if a Monk and a Nunn, I think to be honest, I think a lot of this will really depend on the younger guys they signed. I think if Monk and Nunn are ready for the moment, Horton Tucker, of course, is going to get a lot more time now. He just got re-signed. If those guys are ready for this moment, because they're going to be relied on much more heavily than maybe they've ever been in terms of I don't want to say Nunn because he was on a team that went to championship, but for the other two guys, if those guys are ready for this moment, the Lakers may be able to pull this off because they're the missing pieces. Like to me, they're the Danny Green and KCPs and in some ways Kuzma's, though that's a different position. Like they're those guys. Those guys, Caruso. Those guys rose up to the occasion and filled the missing pieces that the Lakers didn't have when it came to either shooting or defense or hustle, things like that. These other guys, these young guys that they signed and then re-signing with Horton Tucker, if those guys are ready for that, then we know what AD and LeBron are
it's
about.
not big more. It's not
right. It's not. I don't even think it's Melo. Those guys may win you big games because they're clutch players, they're veteran players. But I'm talking about you guys survive the whole season, and to do that, you're gonna need your young guys who are gonna be more healthy, who are gonna have more energy to push these guys and keep them kind of moving until we get to the postseason when the LeBrons and Melos and those guys can kind of turn it up a notch. Excited. As opposed to what we saw last year where LeBron was on 100 from day one because, so many other guys were injured or not ready, and then we saw him break down. So if those guys come up, I think that you'll see the Lakers be a team that will be one of the top teams in the West. If those guys are not ready for that moment, which I just think is a coin flip, I couldn't tell you what will happen. If those guys are not ready for the moment, I think this Laker team might not get out of the West. I think that's very possible. But as a Bucks fan, I just want to see it. I just think this is one of the wackiest things I've seen. Maybe since I guess the Rockets decided not to have a center. That was probably the second most wackiest thing I've seen. But to just throw all these,
probably the same GM who didn't want a center now signed Andre Drummond to play with Joel Embiid, which is another move we'll probably get to. But I just want to say that Monk signing was excellent, man. I
think that was the best move out of all these moves. I think Russ was the best move, but that was the second best move, I would say.
It's certainly high risk, but I mean, from an upside standpoint, I mean, EJ knows. I mean, my love for Malik Monk coming into that draft was super high. I mean, as a prospect, I thought he had a higher ceiling than he showed. But I feel like a lot of what went wrong in Charlotte, some of that was not pertaining to Monk's game as much as some of the other stuff around him. And, being in LA, I mean, look, LA isn't exactly, it's not Idaho, so, he's definitely going to have to lock in. But just in terms of being with LeBron and being with AD and that Russell Westbrook and Melo, I mean, he's got great guys around him now. He's not playing with, no disrespect to anybody in Charlotte. I won't name any names, but he's not playing with the guys in Charlotte. Right. So it's a different environment. So, I think we could be seeing the best version of Malik Monk that we've seen. And if that's the case, man, then that's a guy who may wind up in the starting lineup.
And real quickly, last thing on this, I said it before, the Russ move is controversial, but I understand it. I feel like I can't be mad at it. To me, he's clearly better than Dennis Schroeder. And I don't see these massive... Is the fit a little weird? 100%. But the fit was weird with Schroeder. So to me, it's like, okay, but you got a better player, even though this fit is still weird. Maybe the better player will, at the end of the day, make it work a little
Yeah.
more. So, and I don't, you're not going to miss any. The only guy they'll miss, I think, that they traded was KCP. And I know that may be a punchline for some people, but like, I mean, that guy hit big shots and played really big time defense in big moments. I don't think you're going to miss the other guys. Harold, they didn't want to play. Kuzma's, I think, a good player who's getting a little maligned. He's not the bum that people are saying he is, but he's not Russell Westbrook. You know what I'm saying? There are guys who are. He's clearly. I'm not the biggest Russell Westbrook.
He's not Jason Tatum.
Right. I'm not the biggest Russell Westbrook stan even, but I mean, come on. Like, he's clearly not that. So, and I think to me, when you sign Melo, that lessens that Kuzma blow. Because I think Melo could produce whatever Kuzma will give you. Kuzma's younger, but if Kuzma's not part of your future, that doesn't matter.
They have weird guys that like approximate what KCP did in terms of the shooting or in terms of the defense, but none of the guys they got.
One. Yeah, like Ariza can give you some of the defense. Right. Monk can give you some of the shooting.
Yeah. Ellington can give you the shooting.
Ellington can give you some of the shooting too. None of them give you the athleticism. It's just very weird. The word you use is a weird mishmash of guys. And I can't wait to see how they figure it out. But one of the other teams people are talking about this offseason as well is the New York Knicks. Of course, my New York Knicks. Pretty busy offseason. We didn't know what to expect. We know the big Knicks have been rumored to be big game hunting pretty much, seems like forever, but definitely since Leon Rose became the president. We didn't see those mega names get really attached to the Knicks over this first week of free agency and with a lot of these trades happening, the first week of the official offseason. We didn't see any players like Lillard or any of those guys become available. And we didn't see any free agents like Kawhi Leonard really take the Knicks seriously. He was really the only
Dennis Schroeder.
I wouldn't count Dennis Schroeder as the next big fish to finally land in New York. But like, we didn't see those big superstars that maybe we were. I don't want to say expecting, because I was not expecting it. And I know a lot of Knicks fans were not expecting it. But the Knicks, the narrative's a narrative, so people make up things. But the names that were talked about, we didn't see, or any big names that we've talked about, we didn't see. But the Knicks did make some pretty big moves. So of course they made the decision to re-sign pretty much all those guys that they signed to kind of 1-year deals last year, or acquired through trade on a 1-year deal, like a Derrick Rose, Burks. Noel, all those guys signed. Essentially, Gibson as well. Gibson signed a 1-year deal. All those other guys signed 2+1 deals, essentially around the range of $10 to $12 million per year. And then you had the big signing being Evan Fournier, former Boston Celtics, so you know him pretty well. He signs for a 3+1 deal. I think the deal totaling around for 4 years about like 70 or 80 million. I think 80 million. I think is the number. Obviously it was 3. It's more like 58 million overall in total. And then I think the one that really surprised people was Kemba Walker being bought out by OKC, now signing with the Knicks to become their new point guard. We presume their starting point guard.
Down Bronx.
Shout out to the Rice High School. Shout out to the CHSAA. Shout out, of course, to the Bronx. As I said on my Twitter account, it felt like holding the versus battle between the Locks and Dipset was like acquiring in the Garden. Was like acquiring the Infinity Stones of New York City, and our reward was Kemba Walker becomes the New York Knicks starting point guard. And look, I've seen a lot of also differing takes with what the Knicks did this offseason. I'm going to defend this front office a little bit because I've seen some people say, well, this was not what they expected. They also, by the way, I was just going to say, by the way, they just re-signed Julius Randle, 4-year, $117 million contract extension. I've seen a lot of people say, look, the Knicks obviously improved, but this is not what we were told was going to happen with the Knicks once they got good. Once they got good, we were expecting to see these big-name guys, and now the Knicks are, quote-unquote, mortgaging the future by re-signing, these guys to not 1-year deals, but 2-year deals, which again I don't see what the big deal is, but 2+1 deals. Then you sign Fournier to a 3+1 deal. Randall gets a 4-year extension instead of just running it back with guys with 1-year deals and having a max slot available for free agency, for the time being or forever. It seems like these people want. I don't understand why this is becoming difficult for people to understand what the Knicks have determined. It's very clear to me. Knicks have determined their only way right now to a superstar player who becomes available. And I think me and you have talked about it a bunch on air, or an off air rather, is they realize that that's through a trade. Just the way the players that they like and the way the market is going, especially nowadays, guys are less likely to like go to free agency and risk, anything happening to them. They prefer to just take the max deal and then try to get a trade afterwards. The Knicks have understood that, and in order to do that, you need to have decent players on your books that are movable contracts. Otherwise, what will happen is you'll have to then trade all your assets and you won't have any guys on your team. And essentially you become like, I don't want to say the Miami Heat because they had 3 great players, but you become basically the Miami Heat if they only had Dwayne Wade or LeBron time with them,
or the Knicks in 2011.
Exactly. It's one good player and then your rest of your team is so just not up to snuff. I could be much more harsh, but just not ready for prime time. And you're still not a championship contender. Like now Damian Lillard goes from, that's the name you're talking about, goes from playing in Portland where he has not enough help to going to the Knicks where he won't have enough help. He'll just be in a bigger market. And the Knicks fans and Knicks organization, we're not concerned about just having a star to have a star. The whole purpose is to try to build a championship caliber team. In order to do that, again, they don't want to be in a position like they were when they traded for Melo, where in order to do that, they had to just get rid of anybody that was good except for Amari Stoudemire, and then bring back J.R. Smith, who was decent, who they re-signed, rather. He wasn't even in the trade. But then bring back Melo, and now you're starting, you're playing Anthony Carter a lot of minutes. You're playing guys who you don't want to see getting. Carter. He was getting real time for the Knicks. You're signing Baron Davis. Like you're doing things that you're nowhere close to winning a championship just because you have Carmelo Anthony. This organization has learned that. So what they've decided is we need to have a good crop of players on the roster. So when we have to move the young guys, or even if some of these guys get put in one of these deals, we'll have some guys on the roster and we can move forward. It's clear, it's obvious, and it makes sense. And the moves that they made, they'll get the gambles that they made on Kemba, who even with his knee issues still put up pretty good numbers. It's just light years better than what we had from Elfrid Payton. I don't see where the beef is.
So my question is, I feel like you attacked the narrative that the Knicks offseason was a failure because they didn't get the star player, and why that's not a failure given the way they're trying to go about what they're doing. My question to you is, for this Knicks team as presently constituted, how do you feel about adding? I mean, you just mentioned the Kemba Walker thing, but how do you feel about adding Kemba Walker and Evan Fournier? Do you think that are actually moves that make the Knicks a better team?
Of course, and that's the second prong why I really don't understand this criticism. I'm not here to say the Knicks had an A+ offseason or they hit a grand slam, but to me, the Knicks are clearly a much better team than they were last season. Kemba Walker is just, he's a way better player than Elfrid Payton. He helps them in so many different ways. The Knicks needed a guy who could shot create, a guy who can get into the paint. Kemba Walker can still do both of those things, maybe on a diminished level, but he, again, just a massive upgrade. They also needed guys who can shoot, wings, especially wings particular, wings who can shoot and wings who can create. Evan Fournier shot like 45% from 3, I think, with the Celtics last season. In that short time, his offense may have diminished in some degree. It wasn't his shooting. His shooting was still super high, but to me, it was just his the volume was just lower, and I think a lot of that was the COVID stuff. Different role, right? Yeah. So to me, he was still a very good player. He just wasn't putting up the volume of shots and the activity he was putting in Orlando. But he's just as good, if not a better shooter than Reggie Bullock, and he's a way better shot creator. Also, Knicks needed shot creation on the wing, so you added 2 guys who improved 2 weaknesses on your squad, and then you re-signed other guys who were very useful for your team. Noel was top 5 in blocks. Burks had some major moments coming off the bench. We know what Derrick Rose was, a finalist for 6th Man of the Year. I mean, the Knicks are clearly a much better team. I think the only reason why people maybe are down, there are a lot of people are down. But I think one of the things that make people kind of question whether or not they're still a lock to be a playoff team, not a team that's maybe in the play-in situation or fighting to get to the playoffs, is because the perception is the Bulls took a bigger leap than the Knicks did. And I think we'll argue if that's a fair perception. But no, it seemed like the Bulls took a large leap than the Knicks did. We see, even though the Knicks and Hawks had the same record, that the Hawks were clearly a much better team than the Knicks. So we see that number 4 ranking in the East, and we're like, okay, how real is that, and is it possible they could easily slip out of that very fast? But again, isn't your plan just to improve the team as much as you can? And the Knicks, to me, with the options that they were given, I don't know how much really more you could have asked for.
So look, I think I'm actually an interesting person to talk to about this because I'm not a Knicks fan, but I'm a Celtics fan. So
and you've watched these two guys who were on the Celtics.
Yeah, man.
The last season. So yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, on Evan Fournier, I feel like from the Knicks perspective, I think it's a good move. I mean, you can't be mad about bringing in a guy who improves the talent level of your team immediately. I mean, that's why the Celtics gave up 2 second-round picks to get him. And, some people are upset about losing the picks. To me, it was the right gamble. I mean, bringing a guy who was an 18, 19-point scorer for peanuts. You can't expect Jaylen Brown to get hurt and, whatever else happened in that Nets series and having to face the Brooklyn Nets in the first round. There's a lot of things going on.
Yeah.
So, but, there's no doubt that Evan Fournier definitely helped us. And, of course you wanted to get him back, but I feel like with both guys, with both Kemba and Evan Fournier, I feel like their role in Boston was not what they do best, which honestly is put the ball in the basket and, play with the ball in their hands. That opportunity was not as presented in Boston playing with Tatum and Brown as it will be with the Knicks.
Right.
I think Fournier in Orlando, there was a lot of, space at the wing spot, for him to, handle the ball and, be kind of an initiator at times and a guy who can, similar to what we saw with Gordon Hayward going from Boston to Charlotte. Some people wondered, did he just get healthy? How did he get so much better? I think some of it was the role. It was more similar to what he did in Utah. And I feel like what Fournier is going to do with the Knicks is going to be more similar to what he's used to in Orlando. Kemba, I think it's similar in the sense that what we needed from Kemba, or what Kemba provides, is not what the Celtics needed. Mm-hmm. The Celtics didn't need a guy. Of course, you always take a point guard that can average 20 points, a game. But we didn't need an Isaiah Thomas. We had Tatum and Brown. When Isaiah Thomas was thriving in Boston, it was playing on a team that needed his scoring.
Right.
Tatum and Brown, either Tatum wasn't there and Brown wasn't the player he is now. And so, they needed his offensive punch.
Like the Celtics needed more of like a prime Rondo type of guard,
right,
rather than
a Drew Holiday.
Right, exactly.
That kind of guy to support Tatum and Brown. So far, I mean, we've talked about adding Dennis Schroeder, so I don't know what that means. But I guess he is kind of like Rondo, but it's like a food stamp Rondo. But the problem with Kemba is, again, look, I'm a Celtics fan. I mean, EJ, I was doing backflips when we were able to dump a first-round pick in order to get rid of Kemba. I was like, this is a total win, take on old Al Horford. I was just so glad to get off the Kemba contract. And look, maybe it was prisoner of the moment of having just seen him play as bad as he did in the postseason. And look, maybe that isn't Kemba. Maybe it's the guy we saw for most of the season was pretty good. He wasn't terrible.
Yeah.
He was a good point guard. But, that the guy he was in the playoffs, and the numbers match. He averaged 12 points, shot 30% from the field, 16% from three. I mean, those numbers are putrid. And you're trying to win playoff games, and that's your starting point guard. That's why I kind of laughed when you said he wasn't any worse than Elfrid Payton. I was like, he is better in the sense that, yes, Elfrid Payton, you can't get much worse, but the way he played in the postseason, you can't get much worse than what Kemba was giving. So that's the only reason why it's going to be interesting to see. Because
I think one of the things about the arrangement with the Knicks that makes me a little less concerned about Kemba falling off a cliff the way he did with the Celtics at the end of at the beginning of the postseason is, the Celtics. It's funny that you say they didn't need him to do what he does, and I agree with that. But they did need his presence. Like they needed him to
especially when Jaylen Brown was hurt.
Right, especially when Jaylen Brown went down. You needed him to be Kemba Walker at that point, especially. Like you need him to be an all-star caliber guard who can get 30 on any given night. And I think I hope I know he's had the knee issues. We're hoping that he can overcome that.
100%.
But I think we just don't know if that's something he can do on a regular basis anymore. And when you're going up against, again, those lions over there in Brooklyn who are just going at you, and you got to guard those guys and then provide offense for where he was physically last season, that just might not have been possible. And I think with the Knicks, when you got Quickly and you got Rose, you got other guards who can spell him and do more of the stuff that won't allow him to have to play 30, 35 minutes a night and carry this team. You're asking him to be Kemba Walker, like the Kemba Walker, for 25 minutes probably. And do I think he can do that and stay relatively healthy? I think that's possible. And I think it's worth the risk.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it after the Bucks when we talked about why did Jrue Holiday play after the Bucks won the championship. Why did Jrue Holiday play so well, in the conference finals when he struggled, against Brooklyn? He had moments against Brooklyn where, he just was like, you look lost. And, we talked about how going up against Kyrie and Harden and Durant is daunting. For even star players, if you're not on their level, mentally it can get to you a little bit.
The mental energy you have to expel defensively against guys that talented, and they're all on the same team. Yeah, it's just gonna crush your offense as well.
The feeling of having to go shot for shot. Right. Kevin Durant can just pull up from 35.
He makes it look so easy. Yeah.
It's like that's what made what Jason Tatum did so special. That those guys were playing well, and he was able to. He wasn't afraid of going shots.
Yeah, he was still doing it. Exactly.
But I feel like, the thing with Kemba, the great thing is at the price point, because for the Celtics, he was putting up those numbers, making
at $30 million a year. Exactly.
So you can't have that. You can't have that from your $30 million point guard. So for the Knicks, he's not going to be making that kind of money. The question is just going to be, you still can't have the 12 points because you're relying on him to be that starting point guard. So, look, they're going to load manage him. You have him and Rose who you can load manage, and then you talk about where the minutes going to be for Quickly and Miles and Deuce McBride, but they'll be there because those guys aren't going to play every night. Back-to-backs, like those guys probably won't be playing. Quick and Grimes is going to get plenty of minutes even though they have a deep roster. So, honestly, the moves, the Kemba move, I can't definitively say it's a bad move until I see whether or not Kemba is the Kemba that we saw in the playoffs or is it the Kemba we saw for most of his time in Boston. The Randall extension is also a little suspect only because I don't know the business behind why they did it. Was there some communication, between Leon Rose and Aaron Mintz about, testing free agency and really looking at other options if they did not, give him an extension? Because I feel like what we saw from Randall in the postseason was definitely, again, now, I'm not a Knicks fan, but how would the Knicks faithful have reacted to this extension, a week after the playoffs? What would have been the reaction or a week after the series at ended, rather, as opposed to now? So that's my question. Similar to the Kemba thing. The reason why I was so euphoric about the Kemba trade was in part because it had happened right after we had gotten bounced. So I was totally cool with moving on from Kemba the way he had looked. I feel like with the Knicks faithful, a lot of the vitriol that we saw towards Randall in that postseason, it seems to have went away. But I have questions about a guy because at the end of the day, it's three things. Either it was a total fluke and he's more the guy we saw in the regular season, and that was just whatever a brain fart that he had in that series, or the two negative aspects are, his regular season was a fluke, which I don't think is the case because you can't put together that kind of year, and it be fluky. But the more realistic, scarier option is that he's not a guy who's going to be a great playoff player. Like he's more of a Ben Simmons type, and it's going to be one or the other in terms of him. In terms of him being able to play well in the postseason or him not being able to play well in the postseason. But if he's a Ben Simmons type, or we saw Giannis initially was having struggles in the postseason. That'll be the question: is the guy worth getting paid $30-something million to struggle? When you need him to be your best player. So those are going to be the questions.
Yeah, I mean, I think that those are fair questions, and I was someone who was skeptical of a Randall extension after the postseason. We talked about it a bunch. I was really, really turned off by his performance in the playoffs, despite what was an exceptional postseason. Regular season, I'm sorry.
Yeah, only 26 years old. I mean, sometimes you got to remind you.
Right, and he's still a pretty young player, and he had an exceptional regular season. So, but the postseason was scary. But the reason why I'm cooler on giving him a contract now than I was maybe a month ago is because, again, I think I'm trying to read the tea leaves of what's going on. Sometimes, again, people are like saying things or saying, why didn't you do this? It's like they're playing, it's chess, not checkers. They're clearly doing things based on knowledge that they know. I feel like if they knew there was going to be free agents available next summer that want to be a Knick that would come here if there was free agency, there was cap space, they would tell Randall, hey, we can't sign you now. We got to wait, and we'll just let chips fall where they may. Clearly, they know that's not the case. And I don't think that's an indictment on the team. Like, there aren't that many great free agents. It's a better class. It's a better class than this year, but it's not like, the class where you had, LeBron and Wade and those guys, or even the KD class from a couple years ago. So, to me, they clearly saw the landscape and said, okay, well, we have a star on our team. And this deal we would give him will be much more friendlier than if he has another great season and then we have to pay him $200 million. On the flip side, real quick, I also feel a little better about it because one of the things we saw was that Randall probably was asked to do way too much by the time we got to the playoffs. He's asked to be the point forward and get his own shot. I mean, so much of Knicks' offense was just, Randall going 1-on-5 and getting a shot. His shot making this year was so ridiculous and so great that it was a pretty good offensive option for most of the season. But as we saw in the postseason against a team with really good long athletes defensively, like the Hawks, that just wasn't going to cut it. Well, it's a lot harder to load up on a guy like Randall if you have Kemba Walker and Evan Fournier out there. I'm not saying those guys are superstars, but you just have to respect them. They're not Alfred Payton. They're not.
Stop loading up on Jason Tatum.
And look, Jason Tatum is again, he's another animal. That dude is special. We see what he's doing in the Olympics. But to me, that's the other part of this. I say, okay, the Knicks are a better team now. So just the reliance on Julius Randle to be so excellent for them to have any chance to win dwindles, and you hope that, if there was fatigue that had anything to do with why he didn't play well, he won't have that as much because throughout the regular season he'll have more help on the side. And that doesn't even include the fact that you hope that the young guys on your roster are R.J. Barrett, and Obi Toppin, Emmanuel Quickly, and Mitchell Robinson, that those guys continue to improve. And those guys made strides throughout the season. R.J. had a really good second season. If those guys continue to improve, that also will lessen Randall's load. And to me, even if his numbers come down a bit, it may not be something to panic about. It may be, no, that's good. He's actually staying much more fresher, and he'll be much more ready to go next time in the postseason. And you just got to hope that it wasn't I'm freezing the moment for the playoffs. And even if it was, you hope that maybe so you go through it once, you've never done that before, next time you'll be ready.
Yeah. And I think when you talk about the Knicks and that front office identifying free agents, I think the thing that some of the people haven't picked up on is I don't feel like it seems as if I agree that they're not targeting the guys in next year's free agent class. I think they are still big game hunting, but I think
definitely they're doing it. Yeah, it's clearly through trade. I mean, I just think this is
trades or through guys that aren't going to be free agents
for a long time,
for 2 or 3 years at least. I think about Donovan Mitchell. I think about Devin Booker, guys that we've talked about for a long time. I don't think it's a coincidence that Stephen A. has continued to invoke, when he talks about Damian Lillard wanting to be a Knick, he keeps invoking names like Joel Embiid and Jason Tatum as guys that may end up going to New York if Damian Lillard's there. Like, I think they have their eyes on a lot of different guys. But those guys just are under contract. aren't going to be free agents next year. So what's the point of staying in?
Right.
You know,
Just
going in reverse.
Yeah, again, that's the thing. I don't understand it. It's like let's get because the other thing is if you decide, okay, we're not going to re-sign the guys that really helped you last year and played well. We're gonna sign worse players to 1-year deals and hope that they play just as well. You run the risk of a lot of things. One, you run the risk of your team actually slipping in terms of how well they are, how good they are as a team. And if the Knicks aren't winning the way they were with those other guys, let's say, God forbid, they miss the playoffs. Now maybe the destination isn't as attractive because that was just a fluke. That was a 1-year thing. They're not the Knicks aren't really back per se. So that's one to me big risk that you would have to do that.
Losing Bullock was the one tough one.
Yeah, I mean, if I had to do it over, I would have swapped Bullock for Burks because I felt like Fournier.
What number did Burks get? Because Bullock got a year.
I think he got 3 and 30. I believe it was around that same.
It
was around the same money.
Yeah,
I don't know if Burks. I don't know. I don't think Bullock had any options or anything.
No, it's 3 good years.
Right. So I would have, and that makes it tough because clearly they look at that.
Plan.
Clearly that it's after 2 years that they feel good about things and they don't want to go beyond that. So I don't know what happens after 2 years, but that's what they think.
EJ, you sound like He Who Remains in the finale of Loki. We've entered the void.
So, yeah, once we get to the 2-year point, we've entered the void, and now I don't know what's going to happen. But to me, that was the only one because I just thought Fournier and Burks, you can make an argument, are a little redundant. Like, Fournier is, to me, a better version of Burks.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if, similar to the Lakers, like I don't know if they have anybody that can do exactly what Bullock does as one person.
Quentin Grimes really is the replacement.
He's the guy. Yeah, it's Quentin Grimes is going to come in and be Reggie Bullock, and he might be. I mean, I love the kid. We'll see what he does in summer league.
Replace Bullock's veteran
consistency,
moxie. Yeah,
right.
And consistency. That guy, man, the way he represented. I mean, he was Julius Randle's right hand man. He represented New York in quite a way. And look, I'm not even an Knicks fan. I was like, this guy Reggie Bullock, man. I like his energy. I like his toughness. Yeah. So. Yeah, no doubt.
That was a tough loss, but I think that they're hoping that by clearly improving the talent pool, that will go. And I think Bullock will help Dallas, by the way. I think that they say clearly improving the talent pool will go a long way to kind of minimize that loss. So I feel like the Knicks did pretty decent. I don't understand a lot of the beefs, but there will always be beefs when it comes to what the Knicks do. Am I a hater for being very suspect and skeptical over the praise the Bulls are getting for this offseason? Is this obvious home run that I'm just missing on? I only say that because I think what I will offer up and what I will concede rather is adding these guys based on some of the guys they have. I mean, they have a pretty decent talent pool already. When you start with Vucevic and you start with Levine. So I understand, okay, adding 2 more guys who are starting caliber, 1 guy, borderline all-star caliber player, that looks on paper really good. So I get that. I don't really think these pieces fit well. I understand it's the East, so they might be able to just out-talent a lot of these teams. But to me, I think Ball is kind of going to a similar situation he was in New Orleans, where the ball's not really, no pun intended, is not really going to be on his hands, and he's going to be asked to be more of a spot-up shooter, which he can do, but I don't think that's a guy that's worth 4 years, $80-something million. And I think with DeRozan, he's become a pretty good passer, and he's a pretty good playmaker, so I think that the idea that he's just this black hole is not fair. But I think now this team, after adding Ball, who's shooting has been better, but I think we're always kind of going to have a question mark about that, still needed some spacing, and DeRozan provides you 0. So I have some questions about the Bulls as a unit. I also don't think their defense got better with this move. Ball's a good defender. I don't think of DeRozan as a stopper per se. And defense was their huge issue. And that did not get better. They're going to have to just out-offense teams. And the offense, to me, has pieces that are in a vacuum and individually really good. But together, I have questions.
So, first of all, shout out to our boy Jared from Met the Criteria, who's a big
Yes,
Bulls fan. I'm sure
100%.
he's out in the UK. I'm sure he's excited about these moves. But um, to me, when I look at the Bulls off season, I think it's definitely. I mean, look, you're not wrong in the sense that, I mean, if people are calling us a grand slam, I know
Which is
people
what
are
I've
starting
seen.
to invoke the Atlanta Hawks
Yeah.
name, in terms of could they be the next Atlanta Hawks? I mean, it's a little bit of an overreaction. Um,
I've seen people say
but
Levine's
I
going to be
also think,
Devin Booker next year. That he's going to have this crazy run. I mean, you're laughing, but
yeah,
that's
yeah,
what I saw today.
yeah.
That's what I'm
I mean, look,
saying.
he
Am I a
played
hater
well,
for
no doubt.
thinking this is crazy? I'm not even talking about Levine's talent. Nothing to
Yeah,
do
he
with his
played
talent.
great.
They're
Played
talking about a
incredibly
guy who we think is a loser is all of a sudden gonna and I thought we both thought the loser stuff from Booker was just absurd. But
well. Yeah,
that the notion that this guy who was a quote unquote loser is not gonna have this crazy run and prove everybody wrong and be this monster in the playoffs.
I
The
mean,
Brooklyn Nets still exist, people. I'm
yeah. I mean,
am I crazy?
that's
Like again, am I a
that's
hater for that? I
the
know I'm a Knicks fan, but I'm very skeptical.
yeah. Look, that's the aspect of really all of basketball in the super team era is that, what's the value of making your team better if you're not good enough to beat the super team at the top? And we've seen in weird years like last year and, with 3 years ago when Toronto won it, where there are sometimes these weird years where the team at the top may deal with injuries and you want to be that next team. And
Right.
the Raptors made moves, a la getting Kawhi Leonard to put themselves in the position where they're the best team in the Eastern Conference, and were the best team in the league when they were able to beat Golden State. And Milwaukee and Atlanta made moves that positioned themselves, like getting Drew Holiday and getting Bogdanovich and getting PJ Tucker and Bobby Portis that were positioning themselves in a way in which if the Brooklyn Nets were to have injuries, these teams could find themselves in the conference finals or winning a championship. And so, um, or if Ben Simmons didn't want to, put up layups, you may find yourself in the conference finals. But uh, the so if you're the Chicago Bulls, I mean, look again. Do you look at that team and say, yeah, I mean, put them against the Nets in a 7-game series? No, they're not gonna beat the Brooklyn Nets if the Nets are healthy. But if the playoffs are as weird as they were last year, where you don't know who's even out there for every team, the the Bulls have a puncher's shot with almost everybody else in the East. Just from again the depth, we'll see how they continue to fill out the roster. But the too deep, for lack of a better term, the starting five, the guys, that are gonna be the first guys coming off the bench. Um, I think I think DeRozan is essentially gonna be the quarterback of this team. You
Mm-hmm.
mentioned he's better with the ball in his hands.
Right.
He doesn't provide them much spacing as an off-ball player, and he doesn't provide anybody much spacing as an off-ball player anymore. And so he's going to be a guy that's going to be best with the ball in his hands. Lonzo Ball has never been the best, floor general, in terms of being a guy who, is a high volume, high usage kind of point guard with the ball in his hands a lot. He plays a lot of times off ball. Um, and Levine, we'll see how much Levine is handling the ball as well. So I think it's going to be a nice mix. Um, I agree that defensively there are some concerns. Levine's gonna have to lock in. He's played pretty good defense for Team USA,
Mm-hmm.
so he's gonna have to lock in defensively. But the athleticism, the athletic profile of them defensively suggests that
They should be much
if you
better.
guys all lock in a postseason
Mm-hmm.
environment, I have no doubt that Ball, Levine, DeRozan, and Pat Williams can this very switchable. It's similar to almost like the Milwaukee Bucks defensively.
Yeah.
If Vucevic can be your Brook Lopez, like that, it's an interesting way of thinking the game. And you know, again, talent wise, like they're better than most of the teams in the East. And they're not going to be the 1 or the 2 seed. But if you're the sixth best team in the East, that's a massive improvement from where they've been. And
Mm-hmm.
as we saw with the Atlanta Hawks, who are the 5 seed, you know, being a 5 or 6 seed sometimes gives you a puncher's chance depending on who the teams above you are. So, um, I mean, I like the moves if the goal is to make the playoffs, which the Bulls haven't done in a long time. So,
Yeah, and I think that they've positioned themselves definitely to, I mean, definitely be in a playing situation, and definitely give them a shot to be a top 6 team, no question. I guess, again, I guess to me, I just have this question mark about this. I think people seem to think they have a really high ceiling, and again, to me, I don't know if the pieces fit as well as maybe people think. Like DeRozan and Levine don't strike me as a pair that make that much sense. Because I think Levine also has shown that he needs to have the ball in his hands, and I agree. I think DeRozan should be the guy who handles the rock because he's the better passer of the two. And then again, ball comes off. He goes off ball, which maybe that's his role as a. Maybe that's just who he is. That's what clearly New Orleans thought he was last year. But I think he's at his best and most valuable when he's pushing the rock and getting out in the open court. Maybe there'll be chances to still do that. But, I mean, DeRozan is a half-court player at this point in his career. Vucevic is 100% a half-court player. The only guy that's a up-and-down guy in their starting lineup is Levine. And maybe, I guess, if Pat Williams starts. So, I mean, if ball really is just he's playing defense and he's going to shoot, spot up jump shots. Again, you're paying this guy $20 million. That's
the question.
That's what is he worth it? And my question is, yeah, go ahead.
They don't need offensive value. Like in terms of like they're paying him to be, almost a mini Drew Holiday. Like defend, hit big shots. Timely buckets. We don't need you to be
make winning plays.
Yeah, make winning plays. And the question with Lonzo is that he has all of the ability to do what Drew Holiday does. He doesn't really lack, anything that Drew Holiday.
Well, he doesn't have Drew Holiday's offensive creation.
Probably not to that level, but I mean, there are times where Drew Holiday's offensive creation isn't. He's not Kyrie.
No, but I mean, he's a really good guard. Obviously,
he's strong. He's physical. He can get to his spots. But Lonzo's a big guard, I mean, he should be able to do all those things. But I think the thing that's lacking.
You say he should. I've never seen it. This is 5 years in his career or whatever, 4 years.
The thing that's lacking with Lonzo is the mentality that Drew Holiday has, the toughness, the grit that he's had, really his entire career, that Lonzo has continued to lack. And when you're asking him to be that guy, they're gonna, that's gonna be the question. And that's gonna be the question with this Bulls team is what's their toughness level? What's their grit level? Because they have a lot of guys who, again, like to play offense or aren't really rah. Ball's not a rah. Levine's not a rah guy. Neither is DeRozan. Neither is Pat Williams. Neither is Nick Vucevic. So that's going to be neither is Kobe White. So that's going to be
it's funny. I had an off-air conversation with our dad, and I was talking about Lonzo for the Knicks and why I really wasn't keen on that. And the whole thing about a lot of the question marks about Lonzo Ball's career is he a leader? Is he a leader? And in some ways, I think that's kind of overblown. Like you want your point guard to clearly be able to lead the team on the court, but I don't know if you necessarily need him to be your leader per se. To me, it's more about who is he in your locker room. And sometimes teams need a guy like Lonzo Ball. Lonzo Ball's a laid-back guy. He's a good guy, good kid. Everybody who's played with him really likes him. And he seems like a really likable guy. I could be wrong. I've never seen anybody describe him as a dog. I've never seen anybody describe him as a foxhole guy. Doesn't mean he's not a guy who could certainly help your locker room. But for a team that may need that, like I thought the Knicks clearly continue to need guys like that. I didn't think it made sense for them. The Bulls, to me, are a team that also clearly needs that, and that's not what they're getting with him. So, again, I wonder about fit. Like, is he the guy that makes sense for this roster? Who is the guy that gets this team kind of going, and if they're kind of in a 2-game slide, they lose to some teams that they shouldn't? Right. I don't know who that is on this roster.
Chris Paul in Phoenix. You can say what you want about him. What was his on-court impact in terms of was he the MVP of the team, or was it Booker or Ayton or whatever? But in the locker room, he was that guy. And Book certainly has an edge to him as well. But Chris Paul is the guy that brings that edge and that experience and that toughness. So, maybe it's DeRozan. Maybe DeRozan's seen a lot.
DeRozan's seen a lot. He's won a lot in the NBA, so it could be him. I know he's also a more reserved guy, but he could be one of the guys that's just a great leader by example. The guy's a hard worker. Yeah. He's just a really good basketball player. So I have some questions. The Bulls will certainly be improved. Do I think that they become, the next Suns or the next Hawks, like people are saying? I want to see it before I believe it. I also have questions about what is the value of DeRozan or Vucevic as a third option. One of them is the third option, and with Vucevic especially, if it's him, he's not that good a defender. Is his offensive value so good?
Turning him into Brook Lopez.
Yeah, is his offense that good that his defense won't matter as a third option? You can get away with him in Orlando because the guy's offense is so good. He's your first option, so you're gonna live with his defense. Even as your second option, you'll live with his defense. As your third,
DeMar DeRozan should average 6+ assists next year. He should average.
The talent's there around him. Definitely.
No more than 20 points, ideally, and 6+ assists.
Right, so, and if Levine's getting his 27, 28, then how many shots is Vucevic getting? And if we're not running the offense through him, how valuable is he?
The other three guys on the court, again, DeRozan's going to score, but Ball and I don't envision Pat Williams and Ball stealing any shots from Nick Vucevic.
No,
Kobe will get his off the bench, but
right.
They've got two guys that are non-players offensively. They're just guys who are going to space the floor and do whatever they need to do. So you have the Brooklyn Nets have shown you that they playing with three guys out there. You can find a way. Sometimes there is three balls on the court. We figured out. People didn't realize.
Any other last news where we quickly talk about the draft and the summer league stuff? I mean, obviously Chris Paul went back. We expected that. I wasn't sure if he'd get all the 4 years, but shout out to Robert Sarver for giving them the bread. We talked about the Sixers signing Drummond, which is just kind of hilarious given.
Loved Embiid's reaction.
Yeah, given A, but Daryl Morey's philosophy as a person, and B, Joel Embiid's previous beefs with what's his name. Though people were laughing about that move, but he's clearly better than Dwight Howard. So.
Oh yeah, it's not as a Celtics fan, it's not a move that I was happy about.
Yeah, he's. If he's here to just do Dwight Howard's role, he should be able to do that better than Howard did. So you can't. It's just kind of crazy that a player the caliber of Drummond is signing for a vet minimum. This is a guy who 5 years ago would have demanded $150 million. No injuries, nothing wrong with him. Incredible production, excellent rebounder.
Is he an NFL running back?
His kind of player has now become the 30-year-old running back. It don't matter how many rebounds you average.
Is he Sean Alexander?
It doesn't matter how many rebounds you average and things like that. They don't care about that anymore. If you don't provide a specific skill set as a center, you're just not worth any bread. So it's unfortunate for him because he's still a decent player. But, man, it's a fall from grace. But I think the Sixers lucked out. I also thought bringing back Danny Green was important, and they were able to do that. So I did like that move as well. But let's before we get out, man, let's get into some of this draft stuff in the summer league. So NBA draft was last week. Some of these summer leagues in Salt Lake and Sacramento have already kicked off. Week away,
which
Kendall.
I didn't realize. I one day I just turned on the TV and I saw guys in Utah playing. I was like, wow, they're showing old summer league games. But then I looked at the court and it was the new Jazz color scheme. I was like, I think this is live.
These are real games, man.
I'm like, wow, the summer league started.
Yeah,
so that really snuck up on me. I thought they were only doing Vegas. I forgot that they were also doing Utah and Sacramento. Grizzlies were playing. Zaire Williams wasn't out there because their trade doesn't become official till next week, which the NBA's got to change that rule.
They've got to just overhaul everything regarding draft trades. Everything about it is just wrong.
The stuff during draft night is already confusing enough.
Yeah.
But if you want to say, whatever, figure it out yourself, that's fine. But when it's affecting guys' quote unquote onboarding to a team, when it's affecting their ability to get into the program, that
unacceptable.
That does harm,
unacceptable.
That creates a disadvantage, an unnecessary disadvantage for a player. And if I'm the Players Association, I'm saying we have to fix something about this. I shouldn't have my guy, I don't know, be able to sign some sort of waiver where guys can play regardless, even if the deal isn't finalized. I don't know what you have to do, but figure something out so that guys don't have to wait.
And it's also bad for the league. At the end of the day, we want to see these young kids who just got drafted that you've been talking about for, I know it's not like the NFL draft, it's not months, but, weeks leading up to the draft, and then the week after the draft, we've been talking about these guys, and then they're not playing because You gotta fill out the paperwork's not ready for trade.
Yeah, one of these days it's gonna really mess them up because you're gonna have guys that number 1, 2 pick.
Yeah, you're gonna have a Kate Cunningham type guy that can't play because they traded the number 1 pick, but like they can't finalize it yet. Now, again, that's just playing yourself.
Remember that Andrew Wiggins
fumbling your own bag. Yeah, exactly.
He was playing for the Cavs when we knew he was going to Minnesota. That was terrible.
Yeah.
So,
but so they gotta figure it out. But man, I know you texted me so I gotta bring it just onto the podcast. Are you already conceding on Donovan Mitchell? I mean, Daivion Mitchell.
You're already calling him Donovan, right? You're getting flashbacks.
I'm already calling him Donovan Mitchell because that's how he's looking at something. Are you conceding that?
Well, first of all,
that
I'm
this
a little
kid,
disappointed. It did look
this
like
kid
he's
is special.
45, right? What is he wearing? 15? I was
like,
where's the 45?
I know. I like that he had that like really oddball number for a guard.
He was really going for
it wasn't even like 50, like an even number. It was like 45. Like I've never seen a guard wear. It was like with Pistol Pete back in the day, ran 44.
Besides Donovan, Donovan.
Yeah, I know. True.
It created a kind of a weird sort of.
Maybe it's the D Mitchell thing. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Like that. But Daivion.
Because Davion's my guy. He was sixth on my board. I just love everything about him, and he's really impressed so far.
He was not in my top 5 point guards, right? So,
which was crazy to me. Just completely ludicrous.
Yeah, look, man, I got to eat the crow a little bit. Obviously we have to preface all these statements by it's only summer league. I'm gonna say that for all the guys that I'm not huge fans of, and for the guys that I am, gonna be like, look, I told you. But look, Daivion, if you asked to be, going into the draft, I would have told you that. I love what he gives you, but I'm not a believer in the shot. I'm not a believer in. The speed is there, but like I don't know if he's going to be able to just blow by guys like he did in college. But what he's done in the summer league is be able to hit shots and blow by
guys. Exactly.
So how am I supposed to? What am I supposed to tell you? I know the defense is going to be there. I'm a complete believer in the defense, and if he's got the quickness and the athleticism that he's flashed in summer league, if that translates to the NBA game, I mean, the one thing I'll say about Sacramento, I didn't love the pick, no doubt. Because, again, we was low on my board, and, they already have 2 other point guards. So, didn't love the pick, but they're going to be the fastest team in the league. We know Monty McNair wants his teams to play with that kind of speed, given he comes from Houston, and, again, you draft a Halliburton, you keep Fox, and now you draft Mitchell. Clearly, there's a theme, with the way the Kings are building their roster, but no doubt. I mean, I can't say anything negative about the guy. He's a gym rat, and what I love about him is when you read the extra material on his background and just, I believe there was a story in The Athletic breaking down a lot of his pre-draft process and the work that he does. Scat through when he talks about how, he talks about during the draft that he brought down, 2 of Baylor's, graduate assistants to New York to work out with him, during the draft, during the weekend in New York. So that guy works extremely hard. So anybody that works that hard is not going to fail on some level. So yeah, no doubt. But
yeah, I mean, again, I love everything about Daivion. The character is super high. The work ethic is super high. Just really not too much I can say against him, and I can't say that I'm all that surprised by his resurgence in the summer league. I know I think we both get that at this point. I think a philosophy of McNair and some of these other teams is you just can't have enough really great guards who can get the ball and push and get into the paint. So that to me is clearly what the Kings feel right now. But I think some of it also is their best trade chip right now is De'Aaron Fox. And I'm not saying they're trying to get him out of there. I don't think that's the case. But I think they realize, based on the guys that were on their board and what they value, getting a guy as nice as Daivion Mitchell, where they got him, knowing that their best trade chip is a point guard, it gives them insurance that whenever they got to make a move, they feel that it makes sense to make a move on Fox. If that does happen, you have guards already in the coffers available. You don't have to take back a point guard that you don't really want. You don't have to feel like, well, we can't give up, Fox, because we'll be, the most important position in the NBA will be, at ground zero again. I mean, you'll be like, totally fine if you have Mitchell
it's like
and Halliburton.
Situation. Think about the Philadelphia Eagles, who, see the football. But think about the Philadelphia Eagles. When they drafted Jalen Hurts, the city of Philadelphia lost their minds because they had Carson Wentz. And I believe they had Nick Foles. But even if they didn't have Nick Foles, they had Carson Wentz.
Yeah.
And so there was this Nick Foles was not on the team.
But, he was not on the team.
But they had Carson Wentz, and so it's like, why would you draft a quarterback in the second round when you have Carson Wentz? And we saw what happened last year. Jalen Hurts ends up being the guy. Wentz struggles. Jalen Hurts gets the job. And they're able to trade Wentz for draft assets. They don't even know if they like Jalen Hurts, but they can move Jalen Hurts for Deshaun Watson if need be. And the assets they got from Carson Wentz for Deshaun Watson. So now you have capital. They're not left with no quarterback. Because had they not drafted Jalen Hurts and Wentz had the year he had, they would have been stuck with no quarterback.
Right.
And they would have had to use their first round pick this year on a quarterback that would have, expended one more asset that they now still have. Or is now Devontae Smith, who's a receiver for if they get. So, point being, you can never have too much talent.
Like I said with Leon Rose, it's chess, not checkers. People are just thinking about the move today and not what could happen if 3 moves down the line. And, again, the Eagles started that through when they did the thing with Hurts. I think that's what the Kings are doing. I get it. And it's hard for me to really hate the pick because I love Daivion. But it's just, I think to me that was clearly with the thought process of, look, this might not be Fox's long-term home, so let's make sure we're still strong at the position we want to be the strongest at, even when we move on from an all-star caliber point guard.
The other team that we've seen in Summer League, man, that obviously had a very interesting draft was the Golden State Warriors.
Yep.
And, we only saw Jonathan Kuminga and Moses Moody play one game, but they both really flashed a lot of ability in that one game. And I'll tell you what, man, that draft in general is, Bob Myers told the story of how when they got to pick 4 or 5, Draymond Green texted him, and all he said was Kuminga. And when it got to pick 9, he said Draymond Green texted him, all he said was Moody. And when they drafted both guys, Draymond Green texted him, thumbs up.
Thumbs up.
That's it. It was a very easy draft. In the fact that Draymond was able to identify that early on in the night, going into it, the 2 guys we need to get, Moody, Kuminga. And, it was a complete win. Getting a guy because the debate, I feel like, in the Warriors war room on that 7th pick probably was, do we go with the high-level talent of Kuminga, or do we go with the guy who fits, like Moses Moody, and fits what we do, fits what we need?
Yeah.
And, that debate is a strong one. But obviously Kuminga, I had him 4th on my board, and, I really believe in his talent level. That's too much to pass up at the 7th pick in the draft. Whereas, Moses Moody, I also really liked, had him as my number 2 shooting guard in this draft. To be able to get that guy at 14 is,
right,
that's a steal when that's the other guy you probably were considering at 7. And Woj pretty much, laid that scenario out there. So, and you saw in the Summer League, in that first game at least, the flashes, obviously the comparison to Jaylen Brown is very evident when it comes to Jonathan Kuminga in terms of just the raw athleticism but coordination, athletic coordination and, bounce and, again, scoring knack. There's a lot of similarities to Rudy Gay, who I comped him to Jaylen Brown. He's going to be a really good player if he can just figure out the shooting, and playing off the ball. And I don't know. It may not click next year like it didn't click for Wiseman. But long term, it's quite the asset.
And it's like you said, when we talked about it during the draft, when we were texting back and forth, just the idea that a team with the Warriors that have a supernova like Stephen Curry, we know Clay's coming off an injury. We hope he can get back healthy and be the star he was. We know Draymond, obviously, Olympian, future Hall of Famer. To have a team of that with
They were a
those
playoff team.
with those caliber of superstars, and then also have your young asset base include Wiseman, Moody, and Kuminga.
It's like a baseball.
It's like ridiculous. It's like the Dodgers. Like the Dodgers, somehow have superstar players on the main roster, and then the best prospects in the minor leagues, so that whenever they need to get the next star, they can just get rid of two other guys that people think are going to be future superstars to get a Max Scherzer or whoever that is, and that's to me how the Warriors set themselves up.
Or they can home grow that guy like Corey Seager and Bellinger,
or and Bueller, So that's, man, the Warriors. I thought they had a really good night. It seems like they may have a really good summer and season. Steph Curry saw them boys play and was like, "Yo, where's that $200 million? Give me that. You can't give me that contract fast enough." Yeah. He's like, whether them guys on the team or we trading for Bradley Beal, this is gonna be the place to be. We're gonna be all right very soon.
Yeah. What team are you most excited to see play in Vegas? Or what?
I mean, players? Outside the Knicks, obviously, because I'm a Knicks fan. Team I'm always excited to see. I gotta be the Rockets, man. The Rockets. I mean, come on, that squad. The ball is life all stars. Definitely the team. Definitely the team of hoopers. No basketball players on the Rockets summer league team. It's definitely all hoopers, quote unquote. I mean the Rockets, man. They got a lot of exciting players. Obviously Jalen Green, Alperen Sengun was a guy who was in my top 10 of my big board. They got him later in the first round. You got Josh Christopher. I mean, they're and then of course, we won't of course get to see. Will we get to see? What's the name? Usman? I know.
That hasn't been. I mean,
he just stopped playing. Yes?
Yeah.
I know there's some questions about Wolf.
So some people have
asked Wolf Vildoza to get cut, but that's another story. I mean, that's true. Vildoza was put on the Knicks roster. He's, of course, for those who don't know, Luka Vildoza was playing for Argentina. He was a guy they signed at the end of last season in the Knicks, and he was on the summer league roster. I don't know. I mean, if Garuba is ready to play, I mean, then that I just add to the fact that yes, that's definitely a team I want to see. The Rockets are in a complete reboot, but I think it's a really exciting reboot. They have a lot of guys that have potential, guys who I think can have really good rookie years. So they, to me, immediately jump off the board. I thought they had a pretty good night in general, and they're gonna have one of the better probably summer league teams in this joint.
Yeah, especially if Kevin Porter's playing. I don't think he will, but
I mean, nobody that scored 50 points in an NBA game should ever play in a summer league. That's my opinion.
Someone's got to wake Grant Williams up. He was talking about I these deep playoff runs, and I want to work on my game and rest. And people are like, Grant Williams, Romeo Langford's playing, and Carson Edwards is playing. Where's Grant Williams?
Yeah, Kevin Knox was going to play. I know, and I hope he's okay. I know he's in the player safety protocols.
Yeah, he was in the.
But he was in his fourth year. He's like, I want to go get
J.R. Smith, Nate Robinson mindset. That one.
But Nate Robinson is definitely the GOAT summer league player. That man was playing in the summer league in like his second contract.
Yeah, he honestly might be the all-time leading scorer.
If it's not him, I'd be shocked. Let me say, if it's not him, I'd be like, who played more summer league games than Nate Robinson? So Rockets are my team. Who are you looking at?
In terms of another team, obviously, people are gonna jump to the number one pick, with Cade in Detroit, Luka Garza, Isaiah Livers. They got a nice team that'll be interesting, and they'll match up with the Rockets, which will be fun. I think the Atlanta Hawks are gonna be fun, man. Mm-hmm. Watching Jalen Johnson, watching Sharif Cooper, and we'll see if they run an offense similar to what they had with Trae Young. But the team that I want to mention is the Orlando Magic, because first of all, we may see the first 5-point guard lineup.
Oh my God,
NBA history.
Is RJ Hampton coming out playing the stretch 4?
Yeah, man.
Because you want to talk about a team that's prioritized the point guard position. I mean, my God.
Yeah, and to me, this draft, the theme was just positionless basketball, man.
Yeah.
Because there was no rhyme or reason for, roster makeup. It was all about talent, best player available.
Yeah.
And I've always, me, I've always been the guy that's like best player available is a load of baloney. These teams think about where these guys are gonna actually fit on their team and not where they fitted, well, not where they fit in college, or where they project. But in this draft, I think a lot of teams worried about, just take the
getting
best
somebody that can go out there and play.
Yeah, 100%. And the Jalen Suggs, I mean, he's to me he's their best prospect, on the team, and so it'll be interesting to see how they manage, I mean, how many point guards get drafted in the top 5 and aren't given the ball from day one?
Right.
That's a rare thing, but how many point guards are drafted in the top 5 on a team that has 3 other young point guards? That's also a rare thing as well. So
Right.
I don't know which is going to play itself out, but what is great is that they have 3 of those guys are 6'5", so they'll be able to play multiple positions. And Cole, while he's a little undersized, he is good playing off the ball. So he may not even need the ball. He can be a little shooting guard at times. So, and they're all young players. A lot of those guys know each other. Fultz is the guy I'm worried about because they paid him. He's coming off an injury, and now his role has just been like completely thrown out of whack. And now he's gonna have to get used to playing off the ball, which we've seen Markelle Fultz in the NBA has been most successful with the ball in his hand.
Yeah, because the shot can come and go, and
he's
made great strides to get it back to what it was, but it's still a ways to go. Clearly.
Yeah, and he's been most effective, being able to have the ball in his hands and create and get to the basket.
Get shots that he's comfortable with, as opposed to being told stand in the corner and take the shot that maybe you're not comfortable with.
Yeah, 100%. It becomes a little bit more like what he had to deal with in Philly. So we'll see how they manage that. But the summer league will be fascinating because you have 3 guys. It's almost going to be like, it's going to be a little bit of a, what they call crabs in a barrel, mindset of like these guys are going to be competing against each other, to kind of, this is like training camp starting in the summer league. I've never seen this before. This is a position battle. This is an NBA position battle. Guys trying to play, or I'm going to be the starting point guard. So, I mean, this will be fascinating to watch.
Well, look, if there's any, we've thrown out an idea in our podcast that the NFL should absolutely have the equivalent of a summer league.
100%.
In their thing. It doesn't have to be with pads, just have them play scrimmages, so to speak, or 7-on-7 has been our proposal. The Orlando Magic are like the perfect reason why the NFL should do that. Because those teams that have, they draft 2 quarterbacks, something like that, like seeing those guys play in an NFL, spring league or something like that, like the drama we'd have about seeing that play out, that's pretty much what we're going to see in the NBA Summer League with these young guards. So that is that. If there's any proposal, that would be it.
San Antonio, man. Where were you on the Josh Primo pick, EJ? Because you're a fan
Primo, I think was like 11th or 10th on my shooting guard board. So
I thought you were going to put your board. I was like,
no,
that was a good pick.
Yeah, no, not on my total board. And I thought Primo to me was an early second. To me, Primo was an early second round grade to me. I didn't understand drafting him that high. I understood liking him because he's super young. He's a really good shooter. When I watched the tape, he kind of reminded me of Austin Rivers, who's a good NBA player. Austin Rivers went like 13, and a lot of people say, that probably wasn't the right pick where he went. To me, again, if he would have went late first round, early second round, you said, man, that would have been a really good pick. I think to me with Primo, I think that's probably his upside to me. I didn't really understand it, but I think the Spurs at this point are in a position where they feel like their player development is so good. And I think it goes even beyond just the guy's talent level at where he's at right now. It's who are you as a person? Who are you coachable, and what can we turn you into? And I think that's why they really clearly took a fancy on this guy that no one else did, or at least not any teams I know of.
With the pick is not even the player. From a grade standpoint, the grade is again, I agree. I didn't have a first round grade on him, certainly. There were some guys that didn't get drafted that I like far better than Josh Primo. So I don't know. Take for that what you will. But what I will say is that teams have the right to draft whoever they want in terms of where they evaluate them as players. But from a team building perspective, it goes back to what we've talked about. Is like a guy like Daivion Mitchell, like you liked the player, the fit was a little awkward, but at least you could speak to, look, this guy, it's excellent value. If you're getting a guy who's top 10 in the draft, and we're drafting 9, but some people had him as a 5th or 6th best player in the draft. We're able to get that guy. I don't really care if we have other point guards. He'll be on the court regardless. Josh Primo, you're drafting at a premium. Drafting him at 12 when you probably could have traded down 5 spots, got some sort of asset. You're like, that's what I want, with some initiative in terms of finding. Unless you had,
and it sounded like the Knicks were so desperate to get Duarte, like that didn't make sense to me. Why you didn't just take 19 and 21? I don't understand that.
They may
unless that's a lie, unless that they weren't going to give up those first 2 picks. That's possible.
They had intel that someone else was going to draft him, and if that's the case, then I always say, look, if that's the case, then you got to stay in the pocket. Pick the guy. If you think the guy's gonna, you better be right. But if you think but if you think the guy's gonna be good, you got to stay in the pocket. I think that's the word with Zaire Williams, is that Zach Kleiman said that someone was gonna draft him. Had we not moved up, so we had to get up. We had to move up if we wanted to get him.
Right.
So my problem is that you talk about the Spurs' fantastic player development, but they've drafted like 20 shooting guards in the last 4 years.
Walker,
and they're all still on the roster. Lonnie Walker,
Vassell,
just drafted Devin Vassell. He drafted. Keldon Johnson's another wing who's playing well, and is playing in Tokyo. You have Derek White, who they drafted, another solid player, but DeJounte Murray.
And then they re-signed Bryn Forbes. Bryn Forbes is not back in the fold.
They just brought back Bryn Forbes. So there's a weird logjam at the wing spot in San Antonio. And, look, I don't think you're not drafting Josh Primo anywhere to play him, from day one. He's a project. But it's a weird approach to say we're gonna take the Golden State approach and just say there's a farm system pick. When San Antonio doesn't have – they're not
a good team.
They're not a good team now. They kind of need the help.
Yeah.
And maybe they're just, again, unless you're just mailing it in and saying, we're going to take a
I think that's what they're doing. I think they let DeRozan walk. They let Rudy
walk. Paolo Banchero sweepstakes
and now
ahead.
Yeah, and I think in 2 years,
but then the question is, San Antonio
and Bates.
Yeah, we'll see what the deal is with Bates, because as we know, he's still not.
That's what I was saying. I say also for 2 years, because again, I think this team's gonna be good for 2 years. Like clearly, they're not gonna be good for a while.
Exactly. Yeah. But that'll be the question. But then we also have to talk about. We could have said that the last 4 years about San Antonio, and they've always been too good to be bad. And Pop's too good of a coach for his team to be the worst team in the league. So hopefully, they embrace the tank, a la Sam Presti. Shout out Josh Giddey.
We'll have to see, man. But, man, I thought this was a dope podcast. Hope you guys enjoyed it, not just on our usual audio channels, but also, obviously, our YouTube channel. Of course, if you enjoyed this podcast, you can catch our normal podcast on New Generation Podcast Network. That's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and TuneIn. Of course, the people listening to the podcast, you want to catch us on YouTube, make sure you check us out. New Generation Media on YouTube. Also catch us on social media. We're on Twitter, New Generation Pod, Instagram, New Generation Podcast, and Facebook, New Generation Media. You can find us individually on social media as well. Kendall is on Twitter, New Gen Ken. I'm on Twitter, EG_Stewart, and Instagram, Action EJ. Thank you guys so much for checking us out. For Kendall, I'm EJ. Take it easy, guys. Peace.